Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Jaya Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhāgavatam Ki Jai Nitai Gauda Premanande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naranshaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nasupraya Shurabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Yasyam Vaishyamanayam Krishne Paramapurushe Bhaktir Bhajate Pumsam Sokamoha Bhayapaha. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhāgavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 15, Text number 33, description of the kingdom of God. Nahi ataram bhagavati samasta kuksva atmanamatmim nabo nabasiva dhiraha Hasyanti yatya yuvayo suralingo lingino kim Vayutpatitam hi udara beti bayam yatosya Nahi ataram bhagavati hasamasta kuksva Atmanamatmi nabo nabasiva dhiraha Pasyanti yatra yuvayo suralingino kim Vyuyot patitam hi udara biti bayam yatosya Nahi ataram bhagavati hasamasta kuksva Atmanamatmi nabo nabivasiva dhira Pashyanti yatra yuvayo sulalingano kim Vyupatitam hitudara beti bayam yatosya Yatra yuvayo suralingano kim Maya bayam yudaveti bayam yatosyat Shakuksva Atmananatmi nabonava nasiva dhira Pasyanti yatra yuvayo suralingano kim Manabedi bhayam yatosyat Nopanopalatiya masamasta kuksva Mananatmi nabano nabasiva dhira Yoga yokim Mothers? He, because. Antaram, distinction. Bhagavati, in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Iha, here. Samastakuksvo, everything is within the abdomen. Atmanam, the living entity. Atmani, in the supersoul. Nabha, the small quantity of air. Navasi, within the whole air. Iva, as. Dhiraha, the learned. Pashyanti, see. Yatra, in whom. Yuvayo, of you too. Suralingano, dressed like inhabitants of Vaikuntha. Kim, how. Vayu pahitam, yupahitam, awakened, developed. He, certainly. Udarabeti, distinction between the body and the soul. Bhayam, fearfulness. Yatha, where from? Asya, of the Supreme Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. In the Vaikuntha world, there is complete harmony between the residents and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just as there is complete harmony within space between the big and the small skies. Why then is there a seed of fear in this field of harmony? These two persons are just like inhabitants of Vaikuntha, but wherefrom can their disharmony come into existence? Purport. Just as there are different departments in each state in this material world, the civil department and the criminal department, so in God's creation there are two departments of existence. As in the material world, we find that the criminal department is far, far smaller than the civil department. So this material world, which is considered the criminal department, is 1/4 of the entire creation of the Lord. All living entities who are residents of the material universes are considered to be more or less criminals, because they do not wish to abide by the order of the Lord, or they are against the harmonious activities of God's will. The principle of creation is that the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is by nature joyful, and He becomes many in order to enhance His transcendental joy. The living entities, like ourselves, being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, are meant to satisfy the senses of the Lord. Thus, whenever there is a discrepancy in that harmony, immediately the living entity is entrapped by Maya, or illusion. The external energy of the Lord is called the material world, and the kingdom of the internal energy of the Lord is called Vaikuntha, or the kingdom of God. In the Vaikuntha world, there is no disharmony between the Lord and the residents. Therefore, as God's creation in the Vaikuntha world is perfect, there is no cause of fear. The entire kingdom of God is such a completely harmonious unit that there is no possibility of enmity. Everything there is absolute, just as there are many physiological constructions within the body, yet they work in one order for the satisfaction of the stomach. And just as in a machine there are hundreds and thousands of parts, yet they run in harmony to fulfill the function of the machine, in the Vaikuntha planets the Lord is perfect, and the inhabitants also perfectly engage in the service of the Lord. The Mayavadi philosophers, the impersonalists, interpret this verse of Srimad Bhāgavatam to mean that the small sky and the big sky are one, but this idea cannot stand. The example of the big sky and the small skies is also applicable within a person's body. The big sky is the body itself, and the intestines and other parts of the body occupy the small sky. Each and every part of the body has individuality, even though occupying a small part of the total body. Similarly, the total creation is the body of the Supreme Lord, and we created beings, or anything that is created, are but a small part of that body. The parts of the body are never equal to the whole. This is never possible. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the living entities, who are part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are eternally parts and parcels. According to the Mayavadi philosophers, the living entity in illusion considers himself part and parcel although he is actually one and the same as the supreme whole. This theory is not valid. The oneness of the whole and the part is in their quality. The qualitative oneness of the small and large portions of the sky does not imply that the small sky becomes the big sky. There is no cause for politics and divide and rule in the Vaikuntha planets. There is no fear because of the united interests of the Lord and the residents. Maya means disharmony between the living entities and the Supreme Lord, and Vaikuntha means harmony between them. Actually, all living entities are provided for and maintained by the Lord, because he is the supreme living entity. But foolish creatures, although actually under the control of the supreme living entity, defy his existence, and that state is called Maya. Sometimes they deny that there is such a being as God. They say everything is void, and sometimes they deny him in a different way. There may be a God, but he has no form. Both these conceptions arise from the rebellious condition of the living entity. As long as this rebellious condition prevails, the material world will continue in disharmony. Harmony or disharmony is realized because of the law and order of a particular place. Religion is the law and order of the Supreme Lord. In the Srimad Bhāgavatam, we find that religion means devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Krishna says, "Give up all of the religious principles and simply become a surrendered soul unto me." This is religion. When one is fully conscious that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer and supreme Lord, and one acts accordingly, that is real religion. Anything which goes against this principle is not religion. Krishna therefore says, just give up all the religious principles. In the spiritual world, this religious principle of Krishna consciousness is maintained in harmony, and therefore that world is called Vaikuntha. If the same principles can be adopted here wholly or partially, then it is also Vaikuntha. So it is with any society such as the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. If the members of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, putting faith in Krishna as the center, live in harmony according to the order and principles of Bhagavad Gita, then they are living in Vaikuntha and not in this material world. Om Jnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakoya Chakshuruninitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Caitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swam Padantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshatarine Vancha Kalpatarumbischa Kripa Sindhu Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adigaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vagisha Yasha Varane Lakshmi Yasha Chavakshashi Yasha Ste Hridaye Samvitam Nishimham Maham Bhaje. In the Caitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, he gives this verse describing why the living entity is existing in the material world to begin with. Krishna bole se jeev anahir bahir mukh ataeva mayatare samsara duk. This verse is saying that due to forgetfulness of Krishna, the living entity has been existing in this material world since anhadi bahir mukh. It has been entangled in this material life since anadi, beginningless. It's difficult to trace out when the living entity is entered into the pool of material existence. And Jagannananda Pandit, in his Prema Vaivarta, he actually expands on why the living entity is forgetful of Krishna to begin with. And he says, Krishna bahir moka bhoga vanshakare atae nikatarastana mayatare japadiyadare. So what Jagannananda Pandit is saying is that when the living entity turns away from Krishna for the purpose of bhoga vanshakare, they develop a desire to enjoy separately from Krishna, then Maya is there to catch them. The exact word that's used is japadiya tare. So this japadiya means that you get snatched up. Prabhupada even says that it's like a tackle. He gets tackled. I remember I used to watch football, and sometimes if one of the linemen moves out of the way, the linebacker comes in and just gets the quarterback, and the quarterback, breaks his ankle and back. So many things. So that's what Maya does. As soon as we turn our back from Krishna, turn our face from Krishna, Maya is there to grab us. So the cause of our forgetfulness of Krishna is a desire to want to enjoy separately from Krishna. So the material energy arranges that desire for us. And the first thing the living entity does is tries to enjoy the objects of the senses. But Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Yehi samspasa jaboka dukkha yonaya evate advayan panta kaunteya natesu ramate Buddha. That the living entity, trying to enjoy separately from Krishna, thinks that by the senses, yehi samsparsaja, means the senses come in contact with their sense objects. The living entity thinks it's going to bring him happiness, but Krishna says it doesn't bring happiness, it brings dukkha. Dukkha yonaya, it's actually the womb of suffering. So this goes on to, then Krishna earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, he explains, Dayato visayam pumsam, kamat tesu bhajayate, sangat sanjayate kamam, kamat kroda bijayate. That this, not only does it bring suffering, but the cause of suffering is that those sense objects which are asango yamhi purushaha, which are inherently different from the living entity. Krishna describes the categories of energy that he has in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhumir apanalo vayu kaham monaburevacha ahankara iti ame binam prakritirasata. So, and then he goes on to say, apareyam idastvanyam prakritim vidime param. Jiva bhuta mahabaho yayidam dadate jagat. Krishna is explaining in this verse that his energies are diverse and they're not all one, as some philosophers would like to say. But actually there's diversity in them, and the diversity is based on the presence of consciousness. So although the Bhumi and Apanalo Vayu, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, are inherently unconscious, the conscious living entity develops a sangha with them, and they become a part of who he is. So in other words, the things that we try to enjoy in this world, they create the ingredients for who we think we are. So, one wants to enjoy with a family, and wants to have children and all these things, or, wants to have a business, or so many things people want to lord over. And those things which they try to be a lord over define who they are as a person. So one develops what's known as ahankara. Ahankara is that medium by which consciousness and the living entity is able to enjoy through the medium, because the living entity in its pure state is unable to. So ahankara acts as like a medium between the pure spirit soul and the material energy for the living entity to develop an abhiman, a self-conception, which is different from him being a servant of Krishna. And the foundation of this is based on how the living entity is attracted to particular sense objects. And Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that the options for how one can enjoy is asha pasha statayar bandha. That Prabhupada translates this as an endless network of hope. In other words, a living entity is entangled in this endless network of hope that they're going to enjoy separately from Krishna. And in the process of doing this, they develop so many ideas of who they think they are. So our entire identity in this world is rooted in the fact that we want to enjoy separately from Krishna, and we carry this conception from body after body. Krishna explains, Shariram yaravapnoti yachchami ukrama ishvaraha krihant vaitani samyanti vayurgata ivashayat. Krishna explains that this enjoying mentality has a particular fragrance to it. And just as a fragrance is carried in the wind, so similarly, this conception that we develop within our subtle body of who we are and the things that we're attracted to, we carry this life after life into different bodies. In order to facilitate the particular mood of enjoyment one has acquired within this material world, Krishna reciprocates, or the material energy reciprocates, with a particular body by which one can do so. Sotram shakshus prasanamscha rasanam griham evacha atittasya manasaschayam visayanupasevate. That Krishna provides a particular type of nose, Krishna provides a particular type of eyes, a particular type of tongue, a particular set of ears, a particular set of sense of touch. And all these senses are developed around the mind according to the conception one has carried from a previous life. So all of this is simply Maya. All of this idea of icha dvesha samutena davant mohena bhadata, that this accepting, rejecting on the material plane, that this is good for my sense gratification and this isn't good for my sense gratification. All of this is simply Maya. And Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that all this icha dvesha, functioning on the platform of the mind, of accepting certain sense objects for my enjoyment and rejecting others, this is the cause of the living entity's bewilderment. So the process of Krishna consciousness is the process of declaring war on this conception of life. It's the process of saying, I'm no longer going to cooperate with this conditioning that I've acquired. Rather, I am going to follow what Krishna says, Bahunam Jamananante, that when one accepts the instruction from Krishna, Sarva Dharmam Parikyaja Mamikam Saranam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mokshiyashyami Masachaha, that you no longer have to cooperate with the dictations of your mind and senses. You can simply surrender onto Krishna and overcome those dictations. So the Srimad Bhāgavatam explains that when one comes to the human form of life, it is the particular opportunity in order to engage in this process of saranagati. And the Bhāgavatam says, Labhasa durlabha idam bahu sambhavante manusyam arthada manityam api hadira turnam yatet anapatet anamritya yavan nisheshayabhisaya kala savatavatasya. That this human form of life, labha, having been obtained, is sudurlabha. It's very rare. And we've acquired it after acquiring so many different kinds of bodies. And this human form of life, although it's temporary, anitya, it offers one the greatest artha, the greatest wealth. So everyone in this world is looking for some type of wealth. Some people are looking for wealth in work. Some people are looking for wealth through family. Some people are looking through wealth even through religion. But the Srimad Bhāgavatam gives an interesting story, or rather an allegory, as to the living entity's search for wealth in this material world, this search for a sense of contentment in this material world. In the pastime in the 4th canto of King Parichya Barhi, Narada Muni gives an allegory in which he explains that the living entity's situation is like a deer inside of a meadow. And this deer is eating the grass inside the meadow. He's surrounded by beautiful, fragrant flowers, the sound of buzzing bumblebees. And there's even a she-deer there with him. But he doesn't know that just in front of him there's a tiger, and just behind him there's a hunter. So the Srimad Bhāgavatam, the allegory, is that the deer is a living entity. The flower garden is like a comfortable home. And the buzzing the she-deer is like the opposite sex, and the bumblebees are like the children's sweet words. And so all of these things are going on, and the living entity is completely bewildered by all this so-called wealth that he's acquired. But he doesn't know that just in front of him, there's the tiger of time. At any moment, all this can be wiped away. So the Srimad Bhāgavatam says, Yasatma bhuti kuna petri dhatuke. What's the next one? Yasatma bhuti kuna petri dhatuke. Swadi kalatresu aboma ijadi. Yatirtha bhuti salalena kadhishit. Janeshu abigesus eva gokaraha. That don't accept this material, the body, to be oneself. Don't accept these family members as to be permanent, and don't consider this land that you were born in to be worshipable. And don't go to a place of pilgrimage simply for taking a bath. When you do this, you're just functioning like an animal. So the human form of life is an opportunity to come beyond the animal conception of life. And this verse, labhasa durlabha, it's telling us there's a great wealth that can be achieved. So what is this wealth that the Srimad Bhāgavatam is pointing to? The Srimad Bhāgavatam, the wealth that it's pointing to, is explained by Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Araryo Bhagavan Vrajeshas Tanayasta Dhamma Vrindavanam Ramyam Kachit Upasanam Brajuvadur Vargena Yakalpita. Srimad Bhāgavatam Pramanamamalam Premam Pumarto Mahan. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Tamamanidam Tadodaro Napara. If you want to know what the essential 5 teachings of Caitanya Mahaprabhu is, you can just simply study this verse and contemplate it. Aradiyo Bhagavan Vrajeshas, that Krishna in Vrindavan is the ultimate object of worship. In his land, Vrindavanam is non-different from himself. And the topmost form of worship is the worship of the cowherd girls of Vrindavan. And the basis of all this is the Srimad Bhāgavatam, and the ultimate wealth, the ultimate goal of life is Krishna Prema. So when one comes to understand that this Krishna Prema is the greatest wealth, that there's nothing else that's worth seeking after, and that in all the other forms of life, one has been able to enjoy eating, sleeping, mating, and defending in so many different capacities. It's available in all the other species of life. Then one should turnam yatet anapatet anumritya yavan, that one should pursue this path immediately. One should strive for it immediately. And what is it that one needs to seek out in order to achieve this wealth of Krishna Prema? The Srimad Bhāgavatam, or the Caitanya Charitamrita, explains that we need to approach the guardians of this love. And the guardians of this love is the devotees. Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Haya Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Premi Janma Teno Puna Mukhya Anga. That the root of Krishna Bhakti, the root of devotional service, is the association of sadhus. And faith in this association of sadhus will actually quickly bring prema. Sadhu Sange, Krishna Bhakti, Shraddha Jadi Hoy. This verse is saying that when faith, when Shraddha is born in Sadhu Sangha, in the process of Krishna Bhakti, then what happens is Bhakti Pala Prema Hoy Samsara Nahi Sai. That the fruit of Bhakti, Krishna Prema, the fruit of Krishna Prema, it becomes easily accessible, and simultaneously one's material existence is diminished. So one needs to seek out this association as immediately, as the Srimad Bhāgavatam is saying, because in this association, one will acquire a certain kind of faith by which one can engage in pure devotional service. The qualification for engaging in pure devotional service is one has to have pure faith. And this pure faith can only be cultivated in the association of devotees who have this faith. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains that this faith is Shraddha Sabde, Vishwas Kai, Sudrit Nishtaya, Krishna Bhakti Koila Karma Krita Hoy. That simply by engaging in Krishna Bhakti, all my other karmas are summed up. And that this is the only thing I need to focus on. And that this faith should be very strong, that by simply engaging in devotional service, I have fulfilled all my other obligations. So when one develops this type of faith, then they're relieved from the obligations of their debts to the ancestors, to the forefathers, to the demigods, to the sages, because they've accepted a process which is completely free from acquiring any karma. They've accepted a process which is completely selfless. And this selfless process is described by Rupa Goswami as Anyabhilashita Sunyam, Jnana Karmani Anavritam, Anu Kalena Krishnanu, Shilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. That pure devotional service is performed without any desire for material enjoyment, and simultaneously, it's not covered over by jnana and karma. So when we're engaging in devotional service, we should be very vigilant to see that we are engaging in the proper application of pure devotional service, because there's so many mixed forms of devotion that one can engage in. And one should do this by studying Siddhanta. Siddhanta bole chite nakara alash, yeha hoite Krishna lage, sudrit manash. That one should be very enthusiastic for the study of Siddhanta, study of the conclusions of devotional service, because by studying these conclusions, one's mind becomes strengthened to engage in the process of pure devotional service. And for those who don't study the Siddhanta and take the Siddhanta seriously and try to understand it in total, then what happens is one will never be able to eradicate anarthas. That's the opposite conclusion of this verse. The positive conclusion is that by studying Siddhanta, one's faith becomes very strong and their mind becomes fixed. And the opposite conclusion is that by not studying Siddhanta, one maintains anarthas within the heart. So they're not able to make progress in the process of pure devotional service. And they acquire processes of bhakti abhas, mixed devotion, which won't actually lead to pure love of Krishna, but actually it will bring material enjoyment and so many other entanglements in the material world. So we have to seek out the association of pure devotees. And this pure devotional service has to be cultivated, anushilanam, in the association of devotees, because real association will protect our faith and simultaneously bring about Krishna prema. Satam prasangam mamavirya sambido bhavanti hritkarna rasayanakata. Tagjosnat asu pavarga vartmani shara ratir bhaktir anu kramisyati. That by being in the association of those who are satam and hearing their rasayanakata, this word rasayana is very interesting. In Ayurveda, rasayana is an internal elixir which completely eradicate any disease. So by hearing the strong message of Krishna Katha, and from the mouths of those devotees who are upholding the principles of pure devotional service, then what will happen is apavarga vartmani, that all the apavargas, the miseries of material life will be eradicated, and simultaneously one will shara ratir bhaktir anu kramisyati. One's cultivation of faith will happen very rapidly. So our material limitation will be extinguished, and simultaneously we'll cultivate the love that is needed to actually serve Krishna. So the reason why I'm discussing all of these things is because what Srila Prabhupada is mentioning is how to bring about harmony in society, particularly within the society of devotees. So in my experience, and according to the conclusions of the Srimad Bhāgavatam, those communities which make the process of Krishna Katha the center of their activity, and everything revolves around Krishna Katha, and they're not just engaging in Krishna Katha for the sake of coming together and just hearing, but actually they're very purposeful in that hearing and chanting. The Nectar of Devotion says that our sadhana bhakti has to be purposeful. Actually, the definition of sadhana bhakti is to be purposeful. Kritya sadhya bhavat sadhya bhavasa sadhanabhitaha nitya siddhasya bhavasya prakritam hridya sadhyata. That sadhana bhakti are those activities which are meant to bring about bhava. So when we come into the association of devotees to hear and chant, the purpose why we come together to hear and chant is not simply to mark it off the list of the things we have to do today. I went to Mangal Artik, I chanted my rounds, I went to Tulsi Puja, I went to Srimad Bhagavatam's class, Prasadam, Haribol. Not like that. The reason why we engage in all these activities is to develop love for Krishna and to go beyond just the regulative activity of devotional service and really enter into a genuine longing to want to love Krishna. And this can only be brought about by begging for this pure association. So when one can find this association of devotees who are engaging in the process of hearing and chanting for the purpose of developing Krishna prema, then what happens is Naham tisyami vaikunte yoginam hridesyuva tatra tisyami narada yatra gayanti madbhakta. That Krishna says, I don't live in Vaikuntha, and I don't even live in the heart of the yogis. But where I live is wherever my devotees are coming together and purely glorifying me. That's where Krishna lives. So actually a community which is centered around pure Krishna Katha for the purpose of achieving Bhava Bhakti, they're actually already in Vaikuntha, they're actually already in Vrindavan. There's a verse that says in the Caitanya Charitamrita, I'm forgetting the Bengali, but what it says is that Vrindavan is the best place for engaging in devotional service because there everyone loves Krishna and Krishna loves everyone. So this is the most ideal to engage in place to engage in Krishna's service. So if, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, if this mood can be adopted partially or completely of making the center of all of one's activities the glorification of Krishna, then that place becomes Vrindavan. And that's the meaning of the Sankirtan movement actually, is to come together to glorify Krishna. And when this is done properly and purely for the right purpose, then it transforms a whole community into Vrindavan itself. So the eagerness with which one needs in order to engage in this type of Krishna Katha is described by Rupa Goswami that we can't walk to this type of association, we have to run to it. Krishna bhakti bhabatamati kriyatam yati katopi labhyate tatalolyam api mulyam ekalam janma koti sukritarna labhyate. That to attain this association and to develop this association, the only qualification that is needed is that if one hears about it, then the only price that one has to pay to achieve it is an intense eagerness, a lolyam, to be in that association. So therefore, we have to pray very, very intensely every day for Krishna to bless us with the best kind of association. And in that association, we can make rapid advancement toward the ultimate goal of life. So Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, I'll just finish with this prayer. He's describing how the sadhus are supporting him, how the sadhus are enlivening him in the Antya Leela. He says, Durgame patime nansya sakalat param gatir mahu swakripa yasti dhanena santa sattva alambanam. This verse is very beautiful. What Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is saying is that my path is very difficult. The process of Krishna consciousness is not an easy one. As I said, we're going to war against the material energy. And not only that, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says that I'm blind. Not only is the process of Krishna consciousness very difficult, but we are being tortured by the momentum of our previous activities. And so we're blinded by our ignorance, and we don't know how to engage in the process properly due to lack of proper understanding in Siddhanta. And then he goes on to say that my feet are slipping again and again. That despite my best effort to engage in devotional service, I am overcome by these anarthas, which are constantly throwing me off the path. You know, sometimes we have days which are really up, and sometimes we have days that are really low. And our mind is never steady in the process of devotional service. So we're constantly slipping on the path, and we're blind, and this path is extremely difficult. Raghunath Das Goswami explains that we're walking on a road, and the six enemies of lust, anger, greed, they're throwing ropes on us, and they're trying to pull us off the path. And so how does one develop steadiness in this process? How does one develop fixity in this process? Kaviraj Goswami explains that swakripa yasti dhanena, that I pray that the sadhus, by their mercy, will give me the charity of the yasti, a stick, and the saints may help me by granting me the stick of their mercy as my support. So in the association of sadhus, we take that stick of their association, and that gives us the support and the strength needed in order to overcome anarthas, in order to overcome our ignorance, and to become situated in a platform of devotion where we're actually fixed in the understanding of Jivera Srupoi Krishna or Nityadas. That this understanding that I'm an eternal servant of Krishna is the all-pervasive mood, that this Bhoga Vritti, through the process of hearing and chanting, has transformed into a fully awakened Seva Vritti. And this is the ultimate advice which is given by Rupa Goswami. Tam nama rupa charitasa sukirtananu smridyor kramena rasana manasi niyoja tistan vrajay tanunuragi jananugami kalam yadet akilam ityupadesha sharam. The Upadesha sharam is that one should engage in the process of hearing and chanting 24 hours a day. And when we do this in the association of devotees, then an eagerness for service in the land of Vrindavan will naturally blossom. So actually everything is being given to us. We just have to pay attention to what the acharyas, the direction that they're pointing us in, and begin to move in that direction. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. So if there's any questions or reflections or discussion based on the class.
Hare Krishna.
Technology. So my question is this: you're explaining how association of devotees is so important, and that we have to absorb ourselves in the sadhana and the practice. So my question is, over the years, I've seen devotees having very good association, really trying to study the sadhana, taking up the practices, and still they fall away. So what are the other dangers that we have to watch out for on the path of devotional service?
Very nice question. What's your name?
Now I have a problem. Kaviraj Goswami says that, he says in humility, but it's true for me, if you hear my name, you lose all your pious credits. But anyway, because I'm Murli Vadaka Das.
Thank you. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that there's 4 anarthas which haunt the living entity. Hridaya Durlabha, which means weakness of heart, that one develops a sense of envy towards other living entities, and that envy can actually knock one off the path of devotional service. There's also a Sat Trishna, which means sensual weakness, that being in contact or around the association of sense objects, one just feels impelled to want to enjoy them. And there's also Tattva Viprama, which means that one doesn't understand the conclusions of devotional service properly. And then finally, the one that's the most pernicious, I think is the word, aparad. The one that is the most dangerous is aparad. So we have to see our position when we're associating with the devotees. There's a tendency, there's this saying in English, familiarity breeds contempt. So we have to constantly train our intelligence to remind ourselves who are we associating with, and not let the materiality of constant association bring us to a point where we're actually offending devotees. And that's why these verses, the second and third verses of the Shikshashtakam are so important for our advancement. Because it's saying, Nam namakari bahudani jasharva shakti statra pitani amitas maranena kala etadrasi tava kripa bhagavan mamapi dur daiva mindrasani hanjani anuragaha. That the name of Krishna is so powerful that all of Krishna's Shakti is invested into that holy name. Nama Chintamani's Krishna's Caitanya Rasa Vigra. Like Krishna is non-different from his name. So Caitanya Mahaprabhu came and he gave himself to the chanting of Hare Krishna. And this holy name is so powerful that there's no rules and regulations and there's no consideration of time and place. And Kaviraj Goswami says that one can even chant while they're eating or sleeping. So Krishna's name is so merciful, it's making itself available. But what's our position? Durdaivam injasani hanjani nanuraga. Durdaivam, this Durdaivam means I'm completely polluted by anarthas. I'm completely unfortunate due to these anarthas, and due to these anarthas, the holy name, which is like a nourishing sunlight, our anarthas cover it like the clouds in the wintertime. So we're not able actually to taste the benefit of that the full rays of the holy name. So the thesis is that the holy name is completely miraculous, and it's able to provide all the Shakti, all the strength that we need in order to make spiritual advancement. But the antithesis is I'm not able to chant this holy name properly, due to my fallen condition. And so the Purva Paksha is that I'm completely fallen, and so therefore, and why am I not able to chant? Because I don't have any anuraga. And so the Siddhanta, the conclusion is Trinana pi sunichena, Tarora pi sahishnuna, Manina manadena, Kirtaniya sadahari. This needs to be worn around our neck constantly in the association of devotees. Because by wearing this around our neck, we can actually appreciate how exalted the devotees are. I mean, I was just thinking this morning, actually it was yesterday, that I saw Bhakta Noah teaching, I think it's Bhakta Kori, how to take Charnamrita. And I was just appreciating that, Bhakta Noah's only been around for 3 months or so. But still, he's teaching someone new how to take the water which has washed the Lord's feet. It's such an amazing process. So, I mean, the hands, the feet, the eyes, everything that a devotee is doing is completely transcendental because it's constantly in contact with Krishna. So the more we see devotees in a transcendental light, we see them according to the activities that they're doing, then we'll avoid making offenses. And if we are making offenses, then we really need to take shelter of the holy name, because the holy name is able to eradicate practically all offenses if we take deep shelter of it. All offenses can be eradicated through the holy name except Vaishnava Aparad. Vaishnava Aparad has to be overcome by falling at the feet of Vaishnavas and begging for forgiveness. And even if they don't grant that forgiveness and you try to serve them, but forgiveness is still coming, then Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that we have to continue to chant the holy name, take shelter of Mahaprabhu. So the holy name is completely merciful. It's just we have to be very careful in the association of devotees and realize who it is we're associating with. Is that okay, Prabhu?
I know Jiva Goswami says the only reason for leaving the association of devotees is offense. And so does that mean I can't be envious of you because you know so many verses?
Actually, I don't know so much. I'm just
Anyway,
parrot repeating things.
Thank you very much for a very wonderful answer.
Yes, Maharaj.
With the direction of your talk today and also the direction of the translation, or not the translation, but the purport by Prabhupada, I thought you were going to go into that verse in Caitanya Charitamrita, where Lord Chaitanya is speaking with Sanatana Goswami, and he describes that we might, be forlorn or depressed, that we have nothing, but Lord Chaitanya assures Sanatana Goswami that your father was actually very rich, and he left a treasure for you, and an astrologer will tell you how to get that treasure. But if you dig on the southern side, there will be drones and wasps, and they will sting you. And if you dig on the western side, there's a ghost, and the ghost will haunt you. And if you dig on the northern side, there is a great black snake that will devour you. But if you dig on the eastern side, you will certainly get your treasure, And then, of course, Bhaktisiddhanta describes what these different things mean, that if you dig on the southern side, the wasps and drones are the karma kanda of trying to do various kinds of pious activities for material benefit. So a person may think that by getting material benefit, that he will become happy. But it's like digging where there are wasps and drones. You get some little bit of happiness like the honey that's there, but at the same time you're getting stung. So that's karma kanda. On the western side is the ghost, and that is jnana kanda, where you're trying to follow some ethereal philosophical threads, and they lead in and out and under and over, and you never come to any conclusion. And this is the ghost that haunts people who follow that path. And then on the northern side is the black snake, which is, as is described by Bhaktisiddhanta, is the black snake of yoga cities, of trying to follow the path of mystic yoga. So in all those three options, you will not actually get the treasure which your father left, in other words, devotional service. So instead one has to dig on the eastern side, where one can actually get the real treasure of bhakti. So it's interesting. That's kind of an interesting analogy, that Lord Chaitanya uses in Madhya. I just looked it up, Madhya 30, or Madhya 20. It's in, around the 130s or something like that. But it's a whole analogy that Lord Chaitanya gives, because this is the nature of how we can get the real treasure of Krishna consciousness. And on a similar note, because we also hear a lot about in this purport about impersonalism, that many people feel that this, all one Brahma Jyoti is actually the highest thing. That if one, I was just talking to somebody the other day about this, that it seems attractive, and people put it forward as being the perfect bliss, because you're merging with it, and it's the ultimate thing. But there's just one philosophical problem, that if the all-one white light actually was indeed the highest thing, well, there's only two possibilities. It is the highest thing, or it isn't. One of those two has to be correct. So if it was the highest thing, then why did it change from that? Because obviously we're not living in that reality. You're you, I'm me. We're not the same person. There's all kinds of differences and varieties everywhere. So obviously it's not that way right now. So if it was the highest thing, why did it ever change out of that? And if it isn't the highest thing, why are we going back to it? So it's a simple thing to think about in that sense, that if the merging with the Supreme, with the Brahmachoti, is the sum all, be all, and the most high form of spiritual realization, then it's obvious we're not in that situation now. Why would we have ever individually or collectively decided to move away from it? But if it isn't the highest thing, why are we trying to go back to it? So it points to the fact there must be something else higher, which is obviously personal service to the Supreme.
Thank you. Anyone else? That's 8:56. Yes. Hare Krishna. I can repeat it. Well, it's important to remember that verse, Anya Bilasya Sunyam, it is describing the abhideya, the process. It's not describing an attainment. So, because it's describing a process, that process is available for everyone. So one can either accept the process or not accept the process. Pure devotional service, the activities are actually very simple compared to, one can go the direction of engaging in mixed devotional service, but actually people do that on the basis of thinking that it's easier. But actually it's more difficult, because in order to fulfill all those obligations, it requires rigidity and exactness. In devotional service, patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakti pranachati. Krishna makes it very, very easy. So the activities of pure devotional service is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. Those are the activities of pure devotional service. So rather than emphasizing anything besides that, just encourage everyone to center their life simply around this activity of hearing and chanting about Krishna and glorifying Krishna, and making the activities of the Sankirtan movement their life and soul. And one can do this in any position in life. Narottam Das Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they glorify Grihe Tako, Vane Tako, Sarahari, Bole Tako. That whatever position in life you may be in, chant the names of Krishna, hear and chant about Krishna. So the process of pure devotional service is available for everyone. The problem is that people have this kaitava tendency. They have some stake in the game. So devotional service requires that we have this faith that Shraddha Sabde Vishwas Ko. That's why I said it's the qualification. Then one has to find this faith and run towards wherever this faith is being distributed. One has this faith, and engaging in devotional service will be very easy. If one has any type of mixed faith in the modes of material nature, then they won't be able to engage in pure devotional service. So one has to get the association of devotees who have that pure faith. Then one can engage in pure devotional service. So I would say always emphasize Anyabhilashita Sunyam and just constantly emphasize it over and over and over again. Because that's the only thing which is Yayatmam Supersedity, you're going to satisfy anyone. The reason why one takes up a mixed process is because they think that by engaging in mixed process, this will make me satisfied. But the Bhagavatam rejects that. The Bhagavatam says, Savaipum samparodharmo yator bhakti rahoksaje. Ahoitikiya pratiyata yayatmam supratirati. The only thing that's going to satisfy you is if you engage in uninterrupted, unmotivated devotional service. So this should be spoken very, very strongly. And someone will say, well, this is such a strong message, not everyone's going to accept it. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati says that the crying need of the modern day is the aggressive pronouncement of the principles of pure devotional service in society. So these principles need to be spoken about. Otherwise people will take up, a lesser thing. But this is the only thing that will actually give true satisfaction to the heart of any living entity. Hare Krishna. Okay. Vansha kalpatarumbhascha kripasindhudeva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantharaj Srimad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Gaura Premanande.